Hey guys.
Hey everyone.
Hey. Hey Vijay.
Hello.
Let's wait for a couple of more minutes and then we can get started. How's it going at your end, Vijay?
Good, hanging in there. Pretty strange times, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Where are you located?
I'm in the DC suburbs. I live in Northern Virginia, about half an hour from DC.
Oh, okay, okay. It seems things are much better that side, right? Or no?
Oh yeah, much better than New York. New York is like uh, crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the growth rate is like consistently around like 4% in here, and that too, like at least in my county, there are about like 20, 25, not more than 20, 25 cases every day, new cases.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty manageable. 2025 is,
Yeah.
and that too out of 2025, you're probably looking at four or five will probably be, needing some sort of hospitalization. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Hey, Terry.
Hi there.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good here, thanks.
So things are in control at your side of the world?
Not ideal. I think we're in the top 15 worst places in the world for percentage of the population affected.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, I think it's a combination of, the medical capacity to handle it, right? I mean, I think Germany has done so far the best in terms of, keeping it to a level where, there is ample medical capacity, right, to handle it and keep on controlling it as it comes.
Yeah, I think the challenge here is that because it's a small island community, it's very easy for infection to spread very quickly across the population. So they were a bit slow in reacting, and now we're seeing the fallout from that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in general, I think if you talk about the slow part in reacting, I think US probably has overtaken everyone. I mean, parts of it were, first they did good, but parts of it were pretty slow, where they actually should have done quite a few things much earlier. But okay, I think we'll. I was hoping, couple of folks from Red Hat. Andrea pinged me. He said that, he has got a conflict, so he won't be able to join. So I think part of it was, going through the open issues with Andrea. But let's, Vijay, forgive me. I just wanted to understand what's the context you are looking at this from? Like, what's the overarching goal at your end?
Yeah, I mean, I myself wanted to actually have a little more active participation than I had last time. So this is my second meeting. Although like last meeting I was only able to join towards the end of the discussion. So my interest is again, I mean, I think basically we're all here for MLOps, I guess. So I've been trying to understand the idea of adopting the DevOps mindset for machine learning software development. And there are like a lot of interesting projects that are coming up. A few that I came across are Kubeflow, Tecton, Argo, Knative. Um, so I'm just trying to actually make sense, trying to create a mental model, kind of a map where each of these projects actually fit in. And again, I could be completely wrong, but I, I was having a hard time trying to understand what's the relevance, or let's say like, when you have like something like a Tecton and Knative, I wasn't able to understand what's the need for something like a Kubeflow.
I
Or
mean, I think we have Qflow's co-founder David on the call, right? So I think he was asked the right question, though I could, speak a lot about, but David, do you want to answer that question?
I'm sorry, it broke up right at the beginning. Could you just ask it again?
So when you have Tekton and Knative to do MLOps, what is the need of Kubeflow? What does Kubeflow give me that Tekton and Knative doesn't give?
Well, so they solve very, very, very different problems. Tecton is a general is a general CI/CD system that executes workflows and things like that. Knative has absolutely nothing to do with anything. It's just a serverless way of running things. Kubeflow is designed to be a packaging system that enables you to easily deploy well-described ML steps and use Kubeflow pipelines as a simple way to orchestrate your workflows of those steps together. Now, under the hood, you could use as your workflow engine something like Tekton. Right now, Kubeflow uses Argo, but I know there's been some discussions to think about whether or not Tekton is the right thing to use for that. But that's just an execution engine for the workload the workflow that is described elsewhere. And you could use Knative as a computation system to provide the compute necessary to execute those. But they're just operating at different levels, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Knative because like in my mind, I was kind of like only thinking about serverless kind of workflows for.
Yeah, and so, I mean, if you want to use serverless, then great, knock yourself out.
So, yeah. Again,
but as far as there is nothing else that's doing clean, cloud native, deployments, declarative deployments of entire workflows, ML workflows that have full understanding at the ML layer.
So I also have another question about Kubeflow and Katib actually. So Katib is currently under Kubeflow project, right? Is like
it is. So it's a separate, but that's a. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, please finish.
So the way I'm actually trying to develop the MLOps workflow for our company is I'm kind of like gravitating towards experimenting with Knative, Tekton, and Katib.
Okay.
Basically trying to understand how do I actually use these three technologies to enable a serverless MLOps kind of a workflow.
Yeah.
And when I look at like Kubeflow, it seems like it's more like an umbrella kind of a project which is trying to put all these things together in a much more unified way, I guess. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, look, when we started Kubeflow, we literally did it for no other reason than it was hard to deploy a distributed TensorFlow job. Like, it just is hard. You have to figure out the deployment strategy. You have to have a namespace, or excuse me, a name lookup system, a name server lookup system that is dynamic. You have to have a way to provision disk for checkpointing and all of these various things. And the more that we looked around the industry, we saw these problems happen over and over again. So you take something like Katib. Look, doing a hyperparameter search, just setting up Katib is hard. Katib is entirely outside of the Kubeflow project. It's a project on its own, but we make it very easy to run that inside of Kubeflow. So your description is right. Think of Kubeflow as a kind of umbrella system for doing deployment of packages, of externally developed packages, and giving you a first-class way to wire them together into workflows.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when I like kind of, and I understand, I think if you go back to the origins of Kubeflow, I guess when Kubeflow started, I guess like none of these projects existed, and it definitely made a lot of sense to start a project like that. But when you have like these other projects that actually started as a community, I think I felt like it's a little confusing for people who are just getting started to kind of like understand like, you know, how all these projects.
Maybe one thing I can do, Vijay, is, very quickly, I think with David, so you have seen the presentations around Qflow, right? So I think to your point, right, very quickly, yes, there are different projects, right, which are more playing at the lower layer, right? For example, yes, there is, there are projects in the open source where you can take, and distributed TensorFlow training on top of Kubernetes. Or, there is a model serving project, for example, something like MLflow. Or, there are hyperparameter optimization projects like RateTune, right? So when this started, the core goal was, bringing these or creating, core projects, which can be, the first class citizen on top of Kubernetes. So using the Kubernetes paradigms of custom resource definitions, and architecting most of the components in a way where, they become a first class citizen to be deployed on Kubernetes to address the end-to-end ML, right? And in cases where components exist outside the community, things like Selden or TF serving, right? Bring it in, right? We don't want to be reinventing the wheel. But, where it makes sense. So for example, if you see the Qflow serving story, there is KF serving, which, to your point, is built on top of Knative. But Knative on its own is not your model serving platform, right? I mean, if you want to handle model serving, there are, 9 other things which you need to worry about beyond just, having a serverless service to actually be able to package and deploy your models. You need pre-processing, post-processing, explanation, right? So the idea that, and same with Tekton, right? And what we are trying to do here, right? So Tekton, yes, it's a CI/CD pipeline, but when you look at something like Qflow pipeline, right, which exists for a reason, and the reason is that, yes, it's not only important to take you from point A to point Z, but you also need, lineage tracking, metadata tracking, caching, right? Things which are very, very important in the ML world. Not only taking you from here to there, but also, showing you the map of how you got there, right? What framework you used for training, what were the hyperparameters used, what was the version of the data, right? You want that whole lineage, because your model, probably what you have deployed, won't be the same in the next 2 to 3 weeks, given the iterative and the very iterative nature of ML. New data set is coming, models are drifting, they're found to be biased, right? You will be continuously retraining, redeploying models, right? So you want to have that very strong tracking system in place. So a lot of these problems, which are very specific to ML world, right, which your underlying systems like Knative or Tekton, they're not even trying to solve, and not even making statements they're trying to solve that. Does it make sense?
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, I don't think I've seen this slide before. I think it makes a lot of sense now.
Okay.
And,
yeah.
and this, of course, is the intent of the MLOps roadmap, which is to try and clarify what all the challenges are in this space, and how we try and normalize some of the approaches to those, so that, regardless of which tool sets you're using, you're going to be able to apply a consistent, best known method for dealing with that problem.
Great. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think
So if you want, I can send this out to you, or if you have access. But in general, I mean, what David was explaining was essentially, there are reasons why, all this was done. Yes, and a lot of it is, bringing together things. But as I mentioned, right, just in the context of Knative, if you see what has been done in the KF serving, right, which is built on top of Knative, but, being able to bring your TensorFlow, PyTorch, XGBoost, scikit-learn models using a declarative step, and then, being able to plug in your own pre-processing, post-processing, explainability into these models is quite a bit of work which needs to be done around that, right? So just having Knative is not enough, right?
Yeah, I think it's great, actually. Yeah, and so again, going back to my participation, I think like this is primary reason is like I wanted to actually understand where everything fits in, and hopefully, as I understand and get more involved in the community, contribute in any way I can. So that's basically why I'm here.
Okay, great. So, so just very quickly, I'll take 5 minutes to just, get to the where we are with the, so we talked about, Qflow pipeline and Tecton and precisely the kind of work right now, which goes to your question, Vijay, right? So, I mean, one of the things, right, Qflow pipeline is built on top of Argo, right? So there is a lot which has gone beyond Argo to actually get the current set of functionalities which we need. And the goal here is now that, as part of the group here for, set of reasons we want this to run on top of Tecton, right? And that's the, one project which we are driving as part of the SIG together, right? Where essentially if we can take the Qflow pipeline Python SDK, and now that's another, popular part of Qflow where essentially the Python SDK has become, pretty much adopted and very popular. And that allows you to craft your end-to-end, pipelines and more, suited for data scientists who are more familiar with Python. So our project here is to essentially take that DSL, Python DSL, get a compiler which can then compile to Tecton, right? So that's phase one, what we are calling, right? And phase two, where we have, a little bit more complicated work, which is essentially, creating an intermediate representation or aligning around an intermediate representation along with Google at a minimum, right? And then taking this compiled output through the KFP UI and the API rather than directly to Tecton, right? So phase two is something, which we will start kicking off. Phase one is where we are working and we are getting very close to right now. So Christian and Tommy, who are here from the team, right, they've been doing some great work in terms of driving quite a bit of this work. And right now, the place where we are essentially out of the, 84, 85 tests we are running, we are now getting 82% success rate. So that means, from all the different pipelines which are here in the Qflow pipeline repo, whether in the contrib, which, has pipelines from AWS, Azure, IBM, GCP, as well as core samples, which are more towards the Qflow core. We are having most of the pipelines now being able to be compiled into the Tecton format, right? So I think we are now seeing light at the end of the tunnel and getting very close to the point where, we shall be able to lock this down and be able to handle, majority of the use cases. As I said, right, our initial goal was the 80-20, right? We want to be able to cross the 80% barrier. And I think the team is now there at this particular point in time. There are still quite a few things which we need in Tecton, right? Things like dynamic params, loops, etc. And I was hoping, so our Tecton committer today cannot make the call, right? So we wanted to bring that up. I don't think we have anyone from the Tecton community today there, I believe.
So, so this project, this phase is being tracked under the Kubeflow project, or?
Yeah, it's so the project itself is, I mean, we use the MLOps SIG to drive, some of the project management and the pack where we need actually, so at times, I invite, for example, Jeremy when I need, something more centric on the Qflow side. He's the tech lead on the Qflow, or, I explicitly invite some of the folks from the Red Hat who are contributing to Tecton. So MLOps SIG is where, the tracking is happening, but the actual project itself is into the Qflow umbrella, right? So if you go to the Qflow GitHub repo, this is the project, right? So this is the project, and at this point, it's called KFP Tecton. So if you're interested in something, like if you're interested in Tecton and you want, Qflow pipeline capabilities on top of Tecton, this is the project to actually be using under it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I'll check that out.
Great. Anyone has any question on that side? Hey, David, since you are here, I do have one question for you, right? And I think this is something vis-a-vis the Qflow pipeline and Tecton. Does, at this point, do you think there is a strategy within Microsoft, not that it is public, if it is something which is public, right, in terms of do you intend to do more long-term productization effort, services effort, or it's more open source contribution play? How do you see this landscape right now?
Yeah, at the Microsoft level, obviously we see a ton of customers using Kubeflow. So for us, we just want to make sure they have a good time on Azure using Kubeflow. We are working very hard to adopt Kubeflow native interfaces, particularly at the component level and so on. We don't have anything to announce about support for something like a hosted Kubeflow or anything like that. But what we will say is we're going to, make it as easy and as transparent as possible for you if you are a Kubeflow user using upstream, clean, kind of neutral Kubeflow to use Azure Machine Learning. And whether or not that takes the form of something hosted or we just offer a compatibility layer or whatnot, but we don't have anything to announce around that. Does that make sense? So if Kubeflow goes forward and says, oh, we're going to swap out Argo for Tecton or something like that, it shouldn't affect us because we're committed to supporting whatever the interface is.
Okay. And do you have like a tool set at your underlying cloud native CI/CD? Like, for example, between Red Hat and IBM, we have standardized around Tecton. Is there an equivalent on your side, like an open source technology on which your underlying CI/CD plans are based on the Azure side?
I don't have anything like there to announce dramatically. We certainly have Azure DevOps, but where we see the most amount of activity right now, both in our customers and the world and strategically, we really like GitHub Actions for CI/CD. It keeps your code and your CI/CD right next to each other, which is quite good, and the process and the structure makes sense to us. So I think that we would continue to support whatever our customers show up with, but as a first-class strategy, we're certainly going to continue to support Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions.
Okay. So, but you do need something to compose those GitHub Actions in a more, declarative fashion. So to create the notion of a workflow, right? Actions on their own, you need some sort of composition around it, right?
Well, I'd be interested to hear what you think is missing from GitHub Actions. You can already compose straight in GitHub Actions quite complicated workflows. That said, we very much expect people to layer together multiple tools based on what makes sense. So, for example, let's say you had a data processing pipeline, and that was all in Spark, and then you had some code tools that you put in GitHub Actions, and then you had a Kubeflow pipeline for doing training on-prem or something like that. You might use any of a variety of tools to compose those different pipelines together. You can certainly do that using GitHub Actions. It has a very rich workflow, but you can also use Jenkins or Tecton or 100 other tools to be the top level orchestrator.
Okay, I hear you. And then, so that's more recent though, right? GitHub Actions came sometime towards last year, right? I believe.
Yeah, GitHub Actions is definitely more recent. It's really kind of reached its next level in the past year.
Okay. Great. Marcin, do you have anything to bring up? Terry? We're probably reaching the end of the time.
Yeah, so from my perspective on the APAC session this morning, the key points were the state of the roadmap currently. Let me just quickly show you where we are with that. We've been working through the challenges table up to this point, and I think we have a fairly broad coverage of the key areas of customer need in there. We're open to more issues being raised there, but the focus now really is moving on to starting to develop the technology requirements table. So we're now looking for people to start to contribute a bit more of an expansion on how we can address individual challenges with potential technology drivers. So the first discussion in this morning's session was around the first challenge with risks and issues surrounding Jupyter notebooks. So the outcomes of that will get written up and submitted for welcome comments on that and any expansions to help cover that off. And if anyone's got anything that they feel they can add to any of these areas, please start submitting PRs. On the other side, the CDF is looking to start promoting the MLOps work next month. So there are some requests going out for any stories or general write-ups that you want to do about individual projects. Make sure you're getting stuff across to the comms team so that they can include those in the talking points.
Great, thanks. I think I'll start socializing this roadmap. I think Jeremy has also sort of pinged this to a couple of folks in the Kubeflow community as well to start looking at, as we are looking at the different components for 2020 and what and how they need to mature, and see if there are things that are relevant which we can pick up as part of the roadmap. So I think I'll start doing it on my end as well. Start, for example, just in the context of notebooks, right? If there are requirements now the fact that whether or not you should be running them in production, I mean, that's more subjective, but in general, if you do use notebooks and most of them are using in different phases of the life cycle, right? How should the Kubeflow notebooks roadmap evolve? And we hope that we will find nuggets here in the roadmap charter you're defining, right? Which are some of the things we can pick up from here. So that will be great. Yeah. Great, thanks. Anything from your side, Marcin?
No, I'm just having an open ear here, guys. I just joined today. Today's my first meeting, so appreciating the roadmap and the work.
Great. So which organization you belong to, Marcin?
I'm with PwC.
Okay. So are you involved in any of these communities, Kubeflow, Checktown, or?
No, but we are taking a focused look at the Kubeflow, and we're looking at some of the features where we can start to commit. There's some things that we want to definitely mature, and so I have connected with Terry in the past, and so this is just me doing my due diligence here, and we'll be looking at Kubeflow and seeing how we can integrate that into our MLOps processes.
Great, welcome, and if you need any help, right, please reach out, and you can ensure that you're not getting blocked there. And David, last thing, I think good job on that paneer tikka masala. I saw the picture and I was like, I'm inspired now. And I told my wife I will be doing a better job than that.
I hope. I mean, my God, I'm terrible. I don't look at mine.
I don't know how it tasted, but the picture looked so appetizing, man. I was like,
it was far better than I would have expected. It didn't. What the real mistake was? I didn't put quite as much like butter and things in. So, I'm definitely going to overload it next time.
Yeah. Okay. I'll probably get your paneer tikka masala picture posted on the agenda doc, right? So that
please
what
don't.
we're talking about.
You guys are making me more hungry now.
What's that?
You guys are making me more hungry now.
I know, I'm starving. Thanks everyone. Thanks for having me on. Terry suggested I join, and Michael Neal, and I'm really excited about MLOps, obviously. I work at Azure, but we're doing a ton of stuff with GitHub. obviously as a co-owner or I mean, as an owner of GitHub with Microsoft. And if you have any questions or anything like that, either Kubeflow or GitHub related, I'm very, even though, Microsoft pays my bills, I really try and help the community forward. So please don't hesitate to reach out for any reason.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, David. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.